Hello, hello, and welcome to the Tip of the Ice-Burgh podcast, brought to you as always by Inside the Penguins. I'm your host, Nick Berlansky, joined as always by Nick Horwat, and it has been a very silent week. It's been a very silent, no, just over a week because Wednesday was that massive news drop last week. We covered it all on last Thursday's episode. So in about a week, it's been radio silence from anything Pittsburgh Penguins. Not much coming out in the way of news. So you know what we're going to do? We're going to do our patented 3M segment where we look at must sign, maybe sign, and move on for all of the restricted and unrestricted free agents for the Pittsburgh Penguins. Horwat, before we get into that, does it make you nervous that it's radio silent on the Penguins, or are you just expecting this because that's usually what happens from the time you get eliminated till the time the end of the Stanley Cup playoffs comes?
It's the way it goes. It's all of the players, all of the general managers, and all of the other front office people just needing a break. Hey, the season's over. Before everything picks back up in free agency, before more trade talks need to happen, let's just take our vacations now.
Yeah.
It is the one bonus of being on a team that loses early. You get a little bit extra time to kind of have to yourself, just relax, vacation, maybe spend some of that bazillion dollars that you just made to go to a beach somewhere, go to Europe somewhere, go home, visit your family because these guys travel. Like it's just a relaxing time. We got the Rust signing in, was necessary, and I'm sure these contract negotiations are still happening within, but again, it's just the early off season at least has its benefits for the players, management, and crew within the organization.
And it is an evaluation period above all. I mean, I'm sure the Ron Hextall, Brian Burke, those guys, they're not taking a vacation right now. It is an evaluation period where they're talking with their scouts, where they're talking with probably the ownership group, trying to figure out a plan of action for the upcoming offseason for the players and for journalists and for fans. This is kind of a break period. You just sit back, watch the rest of the hockey, and not expect much to happen. The Rust deal was nice. It was nice to get that out of the way and have a little discussion about that for the first week and a half of the offseason. But with the little bit of time off, it lets us look at these guys. It lets us really dive deeply into what we saw last season and what we're expecting to see next season. And part of that is all the players that were on the Penguins and their contract is up. Let's start with somebody that hasn't really done anything as a Pittsburgh Penguin, and because he hasn't. He's practiced a few times, and that's it, and that's Nathan Beaulieu. Brought over at the NHL trade deadline. He is an unrestricted free agent. Horwat, what do you do with Nathan Beaulieu? Must sign, maybe sign, or move on? Let's kick it off there.
Oh, yeah, there's an easy one. Move on, because was he ever really on the team? He got here, got in the team photo, and was healthy scratched for the remainder. So no harm, no foul. We still have the draft pick. Quite literally, we took on a contract for 5 games.
Yeah. So, I'm not exactly sure. I mean, I get the point. You needed to have a little bit more defensive depth. That's never a bad thing. But again, Matt, much disrespect, I should say, to Juuso Riikola in that entire instance. But I agree with you. You got to move on from Nathan Beaulieu. You don't have to move on. I don't know why I said it like that, but like, why are you bringing him back? You look at the defense core, there are currently 6 defensemen signed to the Pittsburgh Penguins at the NHL level. Then you add on a guy like P.O. Joseph. Then you add on a couple other guys like Taylor Fedun and players like that. There's no need to bring back a guy like Nathan Beaulieu. There's much more business to attend to. And a guy that's going to take up an NHL roster spot and NHL salary cap space, you don't need to bring that back when there's so much else going on.
Yeah, even just looking at the numbers, I don't think he'd be all that worth it re-signing his contract for. What was he even making last year? Do we know that number?
It was, let me pull it up really quickly.
1.25.
Yeah.
I don't hate that number, but at the same time, it's just looking at the statistical numbers. There's just nothing special there. There's nothing standoutish to be like, yeah, this guy's worth giving another year to and giving a shot to. It's just it was a non-move, really. I mean, we made him travel. We made him get in the pictures, and that was really about it.
Yeah, I would be very surprised if he ends up getting a contract because, I mean, like we said, there's 6 guys, not even 5, 6 guys already signed to the defense. Obviously, they're talking with Kris Letang to make it 7. P.O. Joseph makes it 8. So you're really going to put a priority on a 9th defenseman that realistically is not that great to begin with. I mean, I really don't understand that if they do. But
And looking through the numbers, he's never played a full season. He's played parts of 10 years, which is respectable, don't get me wrong, but I'm not seeing anywhere in here a number reach a 70. His career high in a single season for games played to 64, and those are early in his career with Montreal. So
yeah.
Oh no, there's a 74 in there, but still, it's very rare that he does it, very seldom, and it's just not. He plays half the season.
Yeah, and part of that is not just injury. It's part of that is because he's literally a fringe NHL player at this point.
Yeah, pretty much.
So we're both moving on from Nathan Beaulieu, so let's move on in the conversation as well and talk about Brian Boyle, a guy that came into the Pittsburgh Penguins last year on a PTO originally. Then, due to the injuries of Sidney Crosby and Evgeni Malkin, he found himself with a roster spot and held on to that roster spot the entire season. Played a lot more than we all expected. Played a pivotal role on the Penguins' top penalty kill unit throughout the regular season. And at the end of the day, he did get injured. He was taken out of the playoffs. He did have to get surgery. What are we doing with Brian Boyle, an aging forward veteran that is coming off of an injury heading into the next offseason?
I mean, odds are he's making his own decision and retiring. That's just kind of the vibe I get. Like, yeah, he's 37, going to be 38, and could still have a year or two left in him just because NHL players usually go to about 38, 39. But he's got the hard miles. So there's subtracting a couple years. He's already a couple years past his due date, it seems. And there's nothing wrong with that. I do think it's his own decision this summer. I'd say he's just retiring. Regardless, I'd say it's a move on for him just because I mean, you were here on a PTO. You weren't expected to play 66 games, but you did. You played great. Don't get me wrong. Absolutely loved watching him play because it was just fun. Big guys playing hockey is hysterical sometimes. And I can remember watching early on that really early like voluntary skate he had with the guys. The guys loved him then. He was a good locker room guy all around, but yeah, I mean, the time is up for him here. Time is up probably on his career, which, you know, again, respectable career. We talked about Beaulieu's games played, 871 in over 14 seasons for Brian Boyle, and a Masterton Award under his belt. I'd say he's done plenty in the league. Sure, he didn't get the big one, but not many people do. But yeah, I'd say his time's just up. That's all. It's retirement time, I'd say.
Yeah, looking at Brian Boyle, he was also a Masterton nominee this year for the Pittsburgh Penguins. And when you talked about his signing, when we both talked about his signing at the beginning of the season, we said, okay, this is a stopgap till we get guys healthy. I don't think either of us expected 66 games played from Brian Boyle. And he was in the playoff starting lineup. And yes, while he did get injured, yes, while he did look like he was a step slower than the New York Rangers, so did everybody else in this postseason, it seems like. So 11 goals, 21 points in 66 games played. You cannot ask for more from a fourth line center. I mean, this guy has played center. He played wing on the fourth line. He was the healthy scratch when need be, but he was also a great penalty killer for the Pittsburgh Penguins. And as you mentioned, a fantastic locker room guy. If they could keep him around the organization, I don't know what his plans are after career, but if they keep him around the organization, say like a Jason Spezza, assistant to the regional manager position that he just got after leaving the Toronto Maple Leafs as a player, I wouldn't hate it at all. But I do think they move on from Brian Boyle because I do think heading into the last couple of years of Crosby's career, what we presume to be the last couple of years with 3 years left on his contract, I think the move is not to continue to re-sign older guys. It's to bring up the younger guys or to sign younger guys and try to get a little bit more of that foot speed, because as you look at the Final Four that the NHL has right now, I know things are flowing. I know it's always a copycat league, but if you look at the Final Four right now, what is it? It is speed and scoring. And while Brian Boyle does have the scoring, I mean, look at the in-between-the-legs goal he scored this year. I'm not saying he's not skilled, but you need that speed aspect as well. The one thing that I do like from him is that he was a penalty killer, but realistically, you can find that in a guy like Drew O'Connor that'll do that. Might not necessarily have the goal scoring right away that Brian Boyle did, but it's somebody that I would rather see in that position come next season. So I'm moving on from Brian Boyle.
Yeah, that's just the easy move.
So let's talk about some more difficult moves, because I feel like both of us were easily going to say move on from Beaulieu and Boyle. Let's talk about Danton Heinen. He came in on a 1-year prove-it deal last season after a couple bad years playing for the Anaheim Ducks. Heinen came in, scored 15 even strength goals this year, not to mention a couple other ones to tack on as well as a preliminarily bottom six forward. There were times where he was playing 5 minutes a night. That was like a week-long
Yeah.
stretch where he was in the doghouse, yet he was able to still go out there, get his feet back underneath him, and start producing again. And by the end of the season and by the playoffs, he was producing very well for the Pittsburgh Penguins. Obviously, the main goal being in was game 3 for the Penguins after they had just given up the 3-goal lead to make it 4-4. He scores the game winner, making it 5-4. So I really like Danton Heinen. As soon as the season ended, I said that I would like to see him back. I'm staying on that train. I'm saying you must sign Danton Heinen because depth forwards are at a premium when they can score at this level. He's a guy that he can play in the top 6. I don't think you're at your best power if that's a top 6 forward, but if he is a bottom 6 guy, you are just in a great position. He is the best depth player that the Penguins had this year. The only thing that I have questions with is the fact that he didn't play any special teams this year. I wouldn't expect that he's a penalty killing type guy, but maybe power play too if you bring him back next season.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you there. 100% completely agree. I said before the season, he strikes me as a guy that could turn into a Pascal Dupuis type. He's not going to be your standout player. He's really not. He really shouldn't be playing in the top 6. But if he does, he's going to do just fine. Not great, not standoutish, but fine. But he's the bottom 6 player that you want to see stick around for sure. Just looking at the numbers alone, it's a good season for a bottom 6 guy. Like I said, a depth piece. But the thing that drove the Penguins to the Cup Finals 2 years in a row was the depth pieces that were getting called up. Now, he's not a call-up per se, but he's an important bottom 6 forward that contributes a whole hell of a lot. Even if he was in the doghouse for a little bit, hey, you know what? It helped. The coaching method helped. So good on Mike Sullivan for getting something more out of a guy that needed to show a little more, and good for Danton Heinen for showing he still had it and could still stick around and deserves to stay here for, let's say, a couple more seasons.
Yeah, I would not mind if he got a multi-year deal. I know last year we had the 2 big signings in the offseason were Danton Heinen to a 1-year contract and Brock McGinn to, I believe it was a 3-year deal. And we said, okay, that's cool. Looking back on it, I think I'd rather have had it switched, to be completely honest, and not just because Brock McGinn's final play ended up being what led to the end of the Pittsburgh Penguins season, taking that penalty, but just because of the production that Danton Heinen was able to have in that season as his first year coming back to Pittsburgh, first year in that system. I would love to see him be able to build on. And like I said, give him more opportunities, get him on that second power play unit, get him a little bit more playing time. Because if you look at his time on ice, it was not nearly what you would expect from a guy that ended up being a 15 to 20 goal scorer and doing a lot of his work at 5-on-5. So when I look at him, he's also only 26. Yeah. And he's a restricted free agent. So the Penguins do hold his rights. They will have to extend him at least a qualifying offer. I'd like to see him get signed for maybe 2, potentially 3 years. I would think that 2 is probably what the Penguins are looking for.
Yeah, I would say 2 as well, just because that 3-year, I mean, that's when McGinn is also up. He has 3 years left now. That we talked about it last episode. That's 3-year number. It's going to be big for the Penguins. I just don't know if we want Heinen to be not that we don't want to be part of that conversation, but there could be bigger fish to fry in 3 years.
Yeah.
Than worrying about what Danton Heinen's going to do with the rest of his career.
Well, here's the thing, and I thought about this yesterday for some reason. I was like, well, last year, the only player to get more than a 1-year deal was Brock McGinn. It was a lot of, Brian Boyle came into PTO and signed a 1-year deal. Heinen signed a 1-year deal. Rodrigues signed a 1-year deal. Who else? I don't even remember who else was there, but a lot of players signed a 1-year deal. Zahorno signed a 2-year deal, but I was like, okay, they're really just trying to put together a team, but not really look too far into the future. Put together a team that can compete and that can help Crosby and Malkin and Letang potentially go on a run, but not really make a commitment to that many players. They might do that again this season. They might say, hey, we're going to sign a bunch of players to 1 year because next year, guess what? We get $10 million off the salary cap once again. And that's in 2 players and 1 buyout clause because Jack Johnson's buyout drops $1 million in the cap hit. Jason Zucker, his $5.5 million comes off the cap, and so does Brian Dumoulin's. Now, a lot of people are saying one of those 2 guys could get traded this offseason, potentially. But if they don't, that number still comes off the cap, and that's over $10 million. So if you just buy yourself 1 season, and we think that we have a lot of cap space for the Pittsburgh Penguins this offseason, next offseason is going to just get that much more. So we could see a lot of one-year deals here, and I could potentially believe that Danton Heinen does that once again if he liked being in Pittsburgh so much and if he thinks that's where his game is at its best. And that could, I believe, walk him straight into unrestricted free agency. So it might be advantageous for Heinen to sign a one-year deal. And if that's the case, that makes my must sign with like a very big stamp of approval.
Absolutely. And I think he said himself, if I'm remembering correctly, at least, that he thinks his game excelled here.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you want to say where your game excels because you want to give yourself the best opportunity to be a great player, to gain more money in the future, possibly. Like, sure, you might not be able to sign the biggest deal right now because it was just off of a 1 year, see what you can do type contract. But you've earned the option of another couple seasons to prove it again and start growing your paydays. Let's say it's a 2-year deal. All right, 2 years down the line, however you performed over those last 2 seasons, cash out. That's your cash out time. Yeah. We look at, I'm trying to think of anyone around the league who's at their cash out time. I mean, for what it's worth,
Philip Forsberg,
Johnny Gaudreau. My God, Johnny Gaudreau is ready to cash the hell out.
That's going to be an $11 million. That's impossible. $11 million contract.
Absolutely. No matter where it goes, it's he hit those career highs at the absolute correct time, and it doesn't look like Calgary cares to have him stick around. So I'm not saying Heinen's that kind of level, but he's about to be at his cash out time. So let him play his ass off here. Let him cash out.
Yep. Let's move over to Kasperi Kapanen, because this is a really interesting discussion. Because I mean, you look at Kasperi Kapanen. He is, how old is he? Look, 20. He's 25 right now. He's 25 years old. Going to be a restricted free agent. His qualifying offer is only like $875,000. I highly doubt he would accept that, but he's going to have to take a pay deduction after the season he just had, because realistically, if he does sign that 875, you do it in a heartbeat. But if he wants something close to what he was just making in the deal that he signed with the Toronto Maple Leafs, that's not going to happen. Now, what I actually say is maybe you sign him, because let's be honest, there is no way that he plays as bad as he did in the regular season this year. There's no way he can duplicate that bad of a performance. Secondly, he played pretty well in the postseason on the second line with Evgeni Malkin. He started to pick his game back up. Now, I understand that he's not going to have that level throughout the regular season because it's the playoffs. It's a shorter sample size. You know that you have to go balls to the wall to get the best deal possible. But I don't think he's going to be as bad as he was last year. So maybe you sign him. In my opinion, it is $2 million or under. If that number goes over that, you let him walk.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I liked the idea of the idea of offering him the bare minimum and just seeing what he does with that. Because at this point, that's about, after the season he had, that's about all that he's worth. Now, again, we know he's better than that. We've seen him be better than that in a Penguins uniform. We've seen him be better than that in a Toronto Maple Leafs uniform. We know he's not that bad of a player. It's just maybe this season was just a letdown because he had such the extreme expectations of taking the team over while we had injured players. We saw what he did last year in 40 games, which is 30 points, 11 goals and 19 assists. Solid. And he played through an injury as well. So I think we saw his last season and went, okay, he can now duplicate that, be better in a contract year with guys injured. It's his turn to take the team over, break out, be that player. And then it didn't happen.
Yeah.
So maybe the expectations were really high, and that's what made this season feel like a total letdown. But still, I mean, for what it's worth, you look at 32 points on paper and you say it's not terrible. But you have to remember the role he's given.
Yeah, and here's the thing about it. Whenever the Penguins acquired him from the Toronto Maple Leafs, he was essentially a third liner at that point. He had played his way off of the top two lines, away from Matthews, away from Tavares, and he was a third liner. And a lot of Maple Leafs fans are like, you just gave us a first-round pick for a third-line guy. And all of our excuses was, but he has potential to be he has potential to be a second-line guy, potentially even a first-line guy with Crosby, with Malkin. These are guys that have had line mates play better because simply they're playing on that line. And last year it happened. I mean, 30 points in 40 games was great. That's what we wanted to see from Kasperi Kapanen. But this year, in twice as many games, in 79 games as compared to 40 from last season, he scored only 2 more points and had the same amount of goals. That is a ridiculous regression and it's along the lines of his last 2 years in Toronto. He had 44 points in 78 4 years ago, and then he regressed to 36 points in 69 games. Guess what? He's right along the same lines, but even worse with 32 in 79. Like I said, he cannot be worse than that. And if you bring him back on a contract that goes along with him being a third liner, then then you're in a good spot. But if you bring him back and pay him as a top 6 forward, and he doesn't do that, that's when it starts to look bad. So if he's willing to do $2 million or under, I'll even say potentially 2.5. If you sign Kasperi Kapanen for 2 years, 2.5. I wouldn't take a big swing on him. Maybe even a 1-year show me deal like Heinen had last year. I say maybe sign him if it's for the right price and for the right time. I don't think Kasperi Kapanen's really in any position to make any demands at this point. I don't think he's in a great position to negotiate a higher contract at this point. I think if you get him as a third liner for $2 million, you sign him. Otherwise, qualify him. Say if you don't sign that, you're going to be a free agent. That's fine.
I agree with you there. So it lands in the maybe category just because it could go either way.
Yeah.
And that's just how it is. He sucked this year. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it.
Yeah.
It had to be better. The expectations may have been high, yeah, but you didn't even meet some of them. So the money should not be where it was, which was 3.25. It can't be that high again. That's all it is.
Yeah.
If you get it for much lower than that, absolutely. Sure. See what he can do. Also, just make sure there's no damn clauses on it. Send him off if you need to.
Yeah, no, you cannot give him a modified or a full no trade clause. That would be blasphemy at this point.
That would be, yes. Those are only reserved for the high quality guys.
And Jeff Carter.
For some reason.
So let's talk a little bit about Evan Rodrigues. Let's move on to him, and move on is exactly what I'm doing with Evan Rodrigues. Listen, he had a career season, and no youth player that comes up, because I've always talked since the season ended that, yes, youth next season. I've been crying Valtteri Puustinen. I've been crying Sam Poulin. I've been crying Kasper Bjorkqvist, Drew O'Connor. Those are the guys I want to see over an Evan Rodrigues. I do know I'm not stupid enough to think that a youth player is going to come up next year and replicate the season that Evan Rodrigues just had. They're not. They're not going to score 18 goals probably. They're not going to become an integral part of the first power play unit. That's not going to happen. But will Evan Rodrigues duplicate the season Evan Rodrigues just had? I would doubt it. And when you have decisions to make, when you have people you need to just not bring back because you have to make decisions like that, Evan Rodrigues is lower on the list to me than Danton Heinen. He's even lower on the list to me than Kasperi Kapanen, because I think they're going to come in at the same number, and I'd rather have Kapanen in the bottom 6 than Evan Rodrigues at this point. So as much as I like Rodrigues, as much as I don't think you're going to get one of those youth pieces to come in and have the season that he just had, I don't think he's going to have the same season either. So I say move on from Erod.
I do too. It's just that back half left such a sour taste in everyone's mouth.
Yeah.
Sure, he picked up the game a little bit in the playoffs, but man, it hurts. Maybe if, let's say we get out of the first round somehow, if we had a starting goalie, we're out of the first round.
Yeah.
Let's say we get out of the first round. Let's say we make it to the third round even. And Rodrigues is a decent, not an integral piece, but a decent part of it. Scoring goals here and there, getting assists here and there, making plays. We look at it a little differently.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe because that sample size was so small and that back half was just so horrid.
Yeah.
That's it. I mean, I'm still in a middle ground state, but I am leaning toward letting him go just because we need something new. Evan Rodrigues wasn't supposed to make this opening night roster in my eyes until injuries came in. People were going to miss, and all of a sudden he did that. So he became an integral piece of the organization for the season, but then it fell off. Everything ended for him, and he turned back into a pumpkin where he shouldn't have been in the lineup. So were the playoffs going to look decent for him? Maybe they were going to improve. I mean, 5 points in 7 games is nothing to scoff at. Let's be real. But the fact that it was only 7 games and we couldn't make it past, and his goals were timely. They were good opportunities. It just hurts that it had to end that way. Mm-hmm. And again, like I said, those previous 40 games are not helping. So I'm partial to moving on as well.
Yeah, and you said 5 points in 7 games. 3 of them came in that Game 3 victory.
Yeah. That happens though.
But also, I think a lot of other players step their games up in the playoffs. I mean, look at Jeff Carter's stat line in the postseason.
Yeah.
It was very good. A lot of the Pittsburgh Penguins stepped their game up. And
Yeah.
again, if they would have had a goalie, if that's all we can say at this point.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Rickard Rakell. I have him as a maybe sign. I put out an article on Inside the Penguins a couple of weeks back that said, should he just be a rental? And I'm leaning towards the fact that I'd love to see him back. Listen, I want to explore him and Sidney Crosby and Jake Gensel more like I've wanted to explore anything else before. I really would like to see him back, but when it comes to the cap, it's going to be very difficult. If you cannot bring back a Malkin or a Letang, then it becomes much more reasonable, and I think you do sign him. That's why I have it at maybe. If you have the space to do it, then do it. If you can bring him back and fit him under the cap, then do it. But I just don't know if that's going to happen. So I have a maybe sign for him. I think he's going to have to take a discount to come back to the city of Pittsburgh. I don't know if he's willing to do that. He said he would like to come back and play for the Penguins, but would he like it to the point where he takes that discount? I don't know. So I don't see this getting done, honestly, because I do think at the end of the day that the Penguins are very focused on Letang and Malkin, and somebody that's going to lose out on money and lose out on a contract with the Penguins because of that is going to be Rickard Rakell. So I say maybe you sign him if you can, but I don't honestly see it getting done, unfortunately.
I'd say you can give him up to $4 million. He was only making 3.7, 3.789, 4 for his last deal, and he's worth about 4 for sure. It's the Brian Rust signing threw a wrench into the Rickard Rakell thing. I think.
I think it helped out.
No, you do? All right. Because I was thinking if you lose Rust, well, you got Rakell right there just to give some of that money to and go from there. Now you have Rust with still a team-friendly deal. Mm-hmm. And Rickard Rakell is going to make probably less than that, I would assume.
Yes.
Is that where you're going with it helps?
That's why I think it helps, because if his desire to return to Pittsburgh is as great as he said it was, which again, you never know, but if it is, say Brian Rust ends up taking $6 million, then a discount for Rickard Rakell is, hey, I'll take $5 million, which is, again, similar to Rust. It is a pay increase, but it's not as much as I could have made on the open market. But now that Rust is saying, I'll take 5.125, then Rakell is going to be like, okay, if I want to stay and take a discount, that number is lower, which does help the Penguins, in my opinion. But at the end of the day, it would have been much easier to sign Rakell if you didn't sign Rust, but I also think Rust was a higher priority.
Yeah, Rust was a higher priority. I think I was just fully ready to move on from Rust, though, just for the sake of money and stuff. I think also whenever I say the Rust signing got in the way of re-signing Rakell, that's just personnel-wise. Mm-hmm. Now all of a sudden you have one less roster spot available, and Rust took it, where Rickard Rakell could have slipped right in there. You're saying that it helped in a money situation, which yeah, I totally agree with. It's just a matter of what do they want to do personnel-wise at that point. Mm-hmm. So I'd say you can get them at 4. But again, $23 million in space, right? Is that the number we said?
It's 23.2 right now.
Okay. So you got $23 million in space. You have big guys to worry about, and you have other roster spots to fill out. Quickly, $4 million might look like a big chunk of change. So I want to see him back. I really do. I think you have to re-sign him just for the sake of watching what Crosby, and Gensel can do. But Rust becomes that stopgap and takes that exact roster spot. So it gets hairy. I still think you got to re-sign him, though. I'm fully on board with that Rickard Rakell train. Mm-hmm. And, boy, you better hope he just doesn't ask for a ton of money because, listen, championships and playoff games are not guaranteed in hockey, but money is. So there's that.
Yeah, and here's the thing with the Rickard Rakell deal. If you sign him, you're probably saying goodbye to both Heinen and Kapanen. And some people might be fully okay with that. And I get that. And to an extent, I look at that and I say, okay. But at another extent, it's a matter of, can you bring these other guys back at the same time? If it's an either or, it's a tough decision. I'm glad I'm not making it. I would probably still rather side with the Rickard Rakell train and be like, okay, fill out the bottom 6 with the youth, with the Pustinens, with the O'Connors, because
and maybe a bargain been found somewhere.
Maybe, but a guy like Rickard Rakell, if he can't come in under a certain number, then he's not going to come in, and at that point, you probably see Heinen and or Kapanen back in the lineup instead. So I say maybe you sign him if the money is right.
I'm still all aboard the train. So
Okay, you're on the must sign.
yeah, I think so.
Okay, well let's talk about the big guys because we're going to talk about them extensively throughout the entire offseason. Let's start with Kris Letang. I said move on from I believe both him and Malkin. The last time we did this, I can't remember. I know I said move on from Kris Letang because I got roasted for it on the internet. But I am going to say maybe sign, not because of everybody yelling at me, because I don't really care about that. I'm saying maybe you sign him because you are not going to replace him anytime soon. His talent, his ability, what he's done for this team, you're not going to replace him anytime soon. That just isn't going to happen one for one. I believe this team could ice a defense without him, but it would take multiple moves. They could ice a good defense, I should say, not just a defense, but a good defense without him. But it's going to take more than just, all right, next man up. You're going to need to do something there. But I also think that right side is very weak. The right side of the Penguins defense without Kris Letang reads John Marino, Chad Ruhwedel, and then Mark Friedman on his natural side. Mark Friedman's been playing on his off wing since he came to Pittsburgh, playing on the left side.
And playing fine.
But it would be Marino, Ruhwedel, Freeman, compared to the left side, which is still Dumoulin, Pettersson, Matheson, Joseph. That's a very weak right side because both Ruhwedel and Freeman are at their best when they are in the bottom pairing. They're not top four guys, and John Marino is not the type of guy to play top pairing minutes. So that's the issue, is that you're going to need another top four guy if Letang goes out. And at this point, maybe you just sign Letang, especially if he's willing to work with you on a deal. I'm saying maybe you sign him. I wouldn't sign him for a ridiculous $9 million, $10 million. I wouldn't even sign him for $8.5 million. But if you can sign Kris Letang for around what he was making or less, you probably should do it.
The big word there is less, because it doesn't seem like that's going to happen. He seems pretty hard set on something starting with 7, which
and the other thing too is he wants potentially 5 years, which is a very big commitment for a guy that is 35 and has had an extensive health history that we don't need to rehash right now. Listen, I love Kris Letang. I do. And it's been a windy road for me to get to the point where I could say that, because there was a time where I was as anti Kris Letang as somebody on Twitter. But, he's turned it around. He's had his best years the last couple of seasons, and he's been healthy. And that's been the big thing. I mean, knock on wood that he stays that way. But if you can sign him for a good deal, you have to bring him back, because without him, this defense, although I could see a possibility where they're okay, it's just, you're going to have to do a lot of work to get them there.
The Kris Letang discussion is so hard because he is impossible to replace. I think if you lose Kris Letang, if he's gone, you got to rebuild the entire defense, all of them, from the ground up. Maybe Freeman and Ruhwedel stick around. Sure. John Marino, I think, may just have to become the top guy. I mean, one day it was going to be his anyway. That day may just be bumped up a year or two. Sucks to say, but hey, things happen. Maybe Dumoulin sticks around somehow, but hopefully the Cody Ceci effect kicks in, and then when you bump him down a line or two, there's the magic.
Better. Yeah.
I was talking about this at the office yesterday, that maybe that's what needs to happen with Dumoulin there, and P.O. Joseph has to get into the lineup somewhere. That is if you lose Kris Letang, though. You have to rebuild pretty much from the ground up and make the maneuvers, make the switches, make the changes. If you get him back, though, suddenly it's other things need to be answered now. There's questions regardless with this Kris Letang situation of staying or going. There's going to be hard questions to answer. And most of them revolve around Brian Dumoulin and who has to leave. So I would say I think also in my head, when it comes to those to the big three, Kris Letang is the easiest to lose. It makes the most sense to lose, I should say.
Yeah.
Taking just on paper, looking at Crosby, Malkin, Letang, of those three, you say, Letang makes the most sense to go play somewhere else. Because we also are Pittsburgh Penguin fans, and we're ingrained in watching our 2 top all-star Hall of Fame forwards
since
for their entire careers. Oh, and I'm talking Lemieux, Yager years. Yeah. We're always watching our 2 forwards, whereas our defense has been good. We've had Hall of Fame defenders. They're always kind of in and out, though.
Yeah,
and that trend can kind of continue. Paul Coffey, Larry Murphy. You want to take it back?
Sergei Gonchar was in and out.
Yeah, Gonchar. the defenders don't necessarily stick around. We don't have Kris Letang is the all-time defender here. So
Yeah.
it's a little easier to see him go. He's already done his work, and it's just hard. I think I'm interested in seeing a brand new defense, though. I don't know why. Some real sick part of me that is like, let him go. Because I also think he's going to be the hardest to re-sign because he's going to be hard on that $7 million number and harder on that 5 years, which boy, oh boy, don't want to do. So I'm going to say, man, get the tissues ready for that return video. And it's game over for Letang in Pittsburgh. It might just be time to accept it.
Mm-hmm. Let's finish this off by talking about Evgeni Malkin, because that is clearly the name. I mean, obviously, everybody's talking about, hey, you got Letang and Malkin. But as you just mentioned, Evgeni Malkin's name is a little bit higher on that list when it comes to at least people that have watched this team for 17 years or however long. I have Evgeni Malkin upgraded from a maybe sign to a must sign.
Yeah.
I think you have to bring him back for multiple reasons. For one, because you don't have anybody in the lineup that's going to play second line center. I mean, Jeff Carter, I'm thinking of dropping him to fourth line. Teddy Bluger cannot get there. And who are you going to pay in the open market as a second line center to come in? Vinny Trocheck? Yeah, hey. I like Vinny Trocheck. I do. But is Vinny Trocheck a point per game player? Evgeni Malkin was a point per game player coming off of a massive knee surgery. I understand he's older. I understand that he has taken a step back when it comes to speed, when it comes to explosiveness. But this is a guy that has played without consistent wingers. Let's not lie about that fact. He hasn't had really consistent wingers. Jason Zucker has not been healthy long enough to get 6 straight games in a row unless he's having to sit on a different stool because he can't physically sit on the player's bench. Rickard Rakell was there for a second and gone. Kasperi Kapanen, we already talked about the season he had. Get him some consistent wingers that are top 6 wingers. He's already willing to take a pay cut. He was over a point a game with a knee surgery rehab going into next season. If he gets a full off season without injury rehab, surgery rehab, and he gets some pretty good wingers, he's going to be over a point a game next year. And you're not going to get that with all the emotional stuff added to it that you're going to get with Evgeni Malkin. So I say you must sign Evgeni Malkin.
I agree. It's the Lemieux thing still always sticks in my head. Lemieux said he watched Jágr go and he's not going to let that happen again. Sure, he may not have the same say in this organization as he did before, but you would hope that when Mario Lemieux talks the Penguins, someone around listens. You would hope. And I'm with you on the must re-sign just because you're not going to get this forever. Why not end it out the correct way? Even if the team is bad, you know what? That might suck. That might be terrible. Sidney Crosby's not going to let this team be bad, and we know he's here.
Yeah.
Evgeni Malkin's might let this team be bad because he might not be great, but at least there's stories to tell.
Yeah.
Again, he's willing to take the pay cut. $5 million is a bit of a pay cut, and he might be able to work around that number. You never know. Because whenever I heard that $5 million rumor, I thought for Malkin, that kind of makes sense. He seems willing enough. It still might be a little insulting because we just don't know what he's asking for. We know what Letang wants. Malkin, we might be able to work with. Mm-hmm. And also, even if we do lose Malkin, I feel like we have options. I like the Trocheck idea. Nazem Kadri could step right in there.
But Nazem Kadri is going to cost just as much as Evgeni Malkin's going to cost.
Exactly. I'd say. I don't know.
And can he replicate what he did this year? Probably not.
I don't know, but I just like the idea. Even if we do re-sign Malkin, if we're able to get Kadri, hey, you know what? There goes
like
literally
a pipe dream.
Yeah,
that's all of the cap space.
I say there literally goes everyone else we just talked about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and my big pipe dream, and I know it's not gonna happen. My big one, I wrote about it, is if we lose both Malkin and Letang, swing for the fences, guys. Johnny Gaudreau.
I had a different swing for the fences, but you can find on InsideThePenguins.com.
Yeah, no, absolutely. If we do lose both of them, though, this team should absolutely swing for the fences. Make something fun out of this.
Yeah. I don't know what they would be reserving time for at that point. Like if you're serious about continuing to contend, you would go after somebody else. But I do think the best move is still to bring back Evgeni Malkin. So
yeah, absolutely, I agree with you.
So let's quickly go through our shout outs and call outs this week because we are obviously going to talk. We talked a little bit long on that discussion, but that's because it's 8 guys and we'll see how many of them actually come back. But our shout outs and call outs. I'm going to lead it off. I'm shouting out Leon Draisaitl because everybody and their mother is talking about Connor McDavid, as they should. 29 points in the playoffs so far. He has tied for first place in the lead, which is ridiculous. But he's tied with Leon Draisaitl. And if you look at what Draisaitl is doing on a bad ankle, he has a sprained ankle and he's playing. He looks like he is lugging around his body so slowly, and he's in a lot of pain. Now he's looking a lot better as time has gone on because it is slowly healing. But he had 17 points in the second round, 2 goals, 15 assists in 5 games. Like I said, tied for first in the NHL playoffs in points with 29, and he's tied with McDavid. The Oilers currently trail the Colorado Avalanche 1-0. Game 2 is later tonight. But this guy, what he's doing injured is so impressive. I know McDavid, what he's doing is also very impressive, but let's give a little bit more respect to Leon Draisaitl, please.
So gross watching those two. Even if they lose, can we just say, even if they lose, should the NHL make an exception on the Conn Smythe conversation? 30.
No.
They're both at damn near 30 points, and they're gonna get past 30 points in possibly like 16, 17 games.
No, because of 2 reasons.
Go ahead.
After the first round, Igor Shesterkin has turned into a monster. And Nathan McKinnon is a freaking monster.
Right, and he will still be around.
Yes.
I just definitely, even if they make the finals and lose, I bet that conversation's still one of them. Because that has happened before. They would be in the building, all of that nonsense that we have literally seen before. But man, this is disgusting. If this series goes to 7 and those two are monsters this whole series, do you know how many points they'll have? Like, we don't know.
Probably over like 50 at that point.
It'll be monstrosity stuff. And we don't know what McKinnon will be at. Sure, he may go on to the finals over the Oilers. But still, I don't know. I just think it's interesting. There will be real discussions to be had about all of that, especially if they're in the finals. But oh my goodness. I think if they make the finals, the names are already getting etched in to the Conn Smythe without doubt. With that, win or lose.
I mean, I still have doubt in that because there's a lot of old heads in that vote for that. That'll be like, nah, they lost.
But come on, I don't know. Again, we'll have to see. But you're right. I mean, that's looking at these numbers. Also, Draisaitl is 1 point behind. But hey, apples and oranges get tonight. That'll change.
Yeah.
It's so impressive. It's so damn impressive.
Who's your shout out this week, Horwat?
I'm gonna shout out the battling Pittsburgh Pirates.
Hey, let's go.
You guys did what?
They did sweep them. I
slept through each one, but you guys did what? In Los Angeles? Good. You know what? Good. I don't like the Dodgers. That's so much fun waking up to every morning. And I'll tell you what, I talked about the Pirates at Pirates Twitter and their memes before. Oh, it's electric. It's an electric factory in the Dodgers Twitter responses because Padres fans are also in there getting on them. Mm-hmm. It's so much fun. It's electric watching them beat really good teams, very high-paying teams. And the first game of the series, how are you going to sign a guy for $27 million a year? I think I saw the number was. I looked it up. That could also be wrong, but it was around there. And he flubs that ball. Man, talk about an overpayment. And I like Freddie Freeman. That's the one downside of us sweeping the Dodgers. I like Freddie Freeman a lot.
Well, that was the first time the Pittsburgh Pirates swept the Dodgers in LA since 2000.
I know it was. So
22
stupid.
Years. So and the fun thing about the comment section, too, is I saw the Pirates Twitter page is actually starting to get in on it.
Yes.
It's not the Pirates Twitter page posted something about what the commentators loved calling your loss and fedoras or something like that. It's the fact that this is a team that right now, if it wasn't for how bad they played against the Reds and the Brewers, they're actually about a 500 team, but it's because they played so poorly against those two teams that they're like 10 or 11 games behind 500.
Every game is house money for the Pirates this year. Every game. And don't underestimate a team playing with house money. I'm not saying they're going to ride this into a 500 season. Hell no.
It'd be nice.
It would be. But it's just fun. I did see a tweet that said they're playing a very bad Diamondbacks team this weekend with 3 pretty solid pitchers. I think it's like Ronzi and someone else. I can't remember who now.
Probably Ronzi, Brubaker,
yeah.
Somebody else.
And they were like, let's ride this in. And I went, let's take a step back for a minute here. It's fun watching this team beat really good teams. We can't play against bad teams. So
Yeah,
let's
the Reds
take
are the worst team in the MLB, and they've absolutely swept the floor with the Pirates every time they've played them.
Yeah,
So
so let's take a step back here and understand what team we're talking about.
Fair
This is
enough.
just unfathomable. That's all.
Fair enough. I'm calling out. Let's move over to call outs.
Yes.
I'm calling out people upset about the Avs Oilers series. Game 1 was 8-6. I've seen a couple people saying, "Wow," and this is what people want the hockey to turn into. This is what people want the NHL to turn into. Okay, it has a high scoring nature. And I'm sure you would much rather see last 2 years when the Stars, Habs, and Isles made it up to this point. But that's the thing about the NHL. Different teams play a different style. And it just so happens that this year, all 4 teams are high paced, high scoring, and 2 of them have really not great defense. Not to say that the Avs have horrible defense, because the Avs actually have some really solid defenders, but Edmonton does not. And Edmonton's goaltender in game 1, Mike Smith, is never good in game 1. So who knows how this is going to go? I'm just enjoying the fact that it is very good hockey. Yes, we got similar things in the Eastern Conference, even though it's going to be Vasi versus Shesterkin, and that should be low scoring, even though game 1 was 6-2. But this year just happens to be a couple of high scoring defense optional teams, and I like it. And I think, you know what? Next year, you'll see the Dallas Stars maybe go to the conference finals. And guess what? Then you can enjoy your slow paced defense, methodical type of hockey that you loved watching the last 2 years when the Islanders made it the whole way to the Eastern Conference Finals and the Stanley Cup semifinals, if you want to call that last year's. But it's just a matter of the fact that people cannot be happy. That's what I'm calling out.
No, that's all it is. People can't be happy. They have to be contrarian. I mean, the question of, is this what people want to see in hockey? 6 to 8 games. Yes, actually. That sounds like a ton of, because you don't think about watching it from your couch. You think, imagine being there. Imagine being in Colorado watching this.
Yeah.
You're hearing your goal horn and goal song 8 times. A lot of times for, let me read the names here. Nathan McKinnon, Mikko Rantanen. These guys are just that good that's how it happens. I would love to stand and cheer for Evgeni Malkin, Kris Letang, Sidney Crosby 8 times.
Mm-hmm.
Is this where the league wants to go? Yes. And get used to it. Do I also like seeing good goaltending? Yes. But Mike Smith is not a good goalie. I don't know how the hell he's pulling this out.
Mm-hmm.
Mikko Koskinen somehow played a lot better than him last game.
Mm-hmm.
And then you talk, how often do you see all 4 goalies in a playoff game, by the way? And I
Not
get
very often.
I get it was an injury, but still, how often does that happen?
And here's the thing too. The last playoff game I went to in person was a 7-0 Penguins win against the Ottawa Senators in 2017.
Electric Factory.
It was one of the best times I've ever had. Least stressful playoff game I've ever been to. And yes, I do like seeing, I wanted to see every game of that Tampa versus New York series be 3-2. Why? Because that's great goaltending. That's some good goals by really talented players. But when you look at 2 rosters, the way the Oilers and Avs are constructed, if this happens, it makes sense because that's how the teams are constructed. That, yeah, they don't have the best defenses because of how good they are offensively. And when they go head to head, that's what's going to happen. If you wanted a team that plays defense, plays well that way, you should have begged the Calgary Flames to play their actual style of play instead of trying to run and gun with the Oilers, because we saw what happened then. If you play out of your style, you will get blown out. Yeah. And that's what happened to Calgary because they played Edmonton's style of play. If Calgary would have played their own style of play, I'm not saying they would have won that series, but it sure as hell would not have ended in 5 games.
Yeah. But this is a ton of fun watching. I mean, Twitter blows up every time the Western Conference plays. Every other day, it's so much fun reading Twitter, watching this score track. Just what is happening?
Yeah.
Again, imagine being there. That sounds electric. You said you were at that 7-0 game. I was at that 7-0 game. The very next series, the Penguins blew out the Predators in a Stanley Cup Finals game, similar score. I was at that one. It's electric in that building every time they do something like that.
Yeah.
Imagine being at the Penguins 11-goal game. Sure, it was against, I forget who it was now.
It was against Detroit on a matinee on a Sunday.
I bet that was a fire fest. Are you kidding me? Who cares? Yeah. That's fun because those are the games you talk about. What did I just do? I just brought it up. I just brought up a random Sunday afternoon game against the Red Wings. Mm-hmm. Why? Because we won 11-0 or something like that. Whatever. We blew them out of the water, and that's entertaining hockey that you continue to talk about. Mm-hmm. We don't talk about the November 13th Thursday at 7:00 against the The Kings were on their East Coast trip. I don't know.
The Friday night 1-0 victory against the Islanders in November? You don't remember that specifically?
Yeah, no, it's.
I couldn't tell you who scored the one goal.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, but hey, big shout out to the shutout of whoever that was, right?
It's Tristan Jarry.
Yeah, exactly.
It was November. It was certainly Tristan Jarry.
Yeah. But that's how it goes. Sure, maybe it's a little excessive, but who cares? Who cares?
So who are you calling out to close out this show?
Whoever the hell decided to remake Winnie the Pooh into a horror movie.
Oh God, yeah.
I didn't watch Winnie the Pooh growing up, but I know that's not what you do, fam. You can do adult versions of things and grown-up versions of things for stuff like that. I think it could be interesting. That wasn't the way though, and it did spark a great conversation in the office of. So, what movies do you want to like? Child movies, books, TV shows do you want to see recreated into horror movies? My first thought was Blue's Clues. I don't know why, but that's just a good answer.
Turns into a murder mystery.
Kind of exactly. I think it'd be interesting. Other than that, though, it's also the images were horrifying.
Yeah, no, that was just heart attack inducing kind of stuff there. And I understand that a lot of the Disney movies originally were the Grimm's fairy tales, which were not happily ever after happy endings. I get that, but they went to a different level with that Winnie the Pooh thing. I saw a couple of clips of the trailer. I was like, that's enough for me. Like, I didn't watch Winnie the Pooh either, but I know I'm not supposed to be cowering in a corner after seeing anything Winnie the Pooh. That looked very petrifying, but nonetheless, I mean,
people will watch it though, and good on them.
People will watch it. People will watch it. Yeah. I mean, I've personally been watching Stranger Things, and they've gone real horror movie, old school horror movie direction with it. Chef's kiss. Perfect. I love season 4, and I have to wait till July to see the second half of it, and I'm sad.
I still have to watch Shoresy.
Same. Yeah, we'll have to do that. And then we'll come back maybe on Monday and we'll talk about Shoresy in case something actually happens with the Pittsburgh Penguins. But that's going to do it for this episode of The Tip of the Iceberg. Thank you so much for tuning in. We will see you guys next week. Have a great weekend, Pens fans.